Chapter 3. Timber Sale. By December, several large walnut trees were cut, limbed, and ready for hauling. After Hezzy and Pappy loaded the logs to take them to town, their main worry was staying clear of any troopers, for fear their team might be confiscated. Above all, they needed the money to carry them through the winter ahead. They reached the road about 10 miles south of Falmouth just at sunup, and arrived at Barry Station by 10 a.m. There, they discovered there was no market for logs or wood of any kind. Assured by the townsfolk that no Confederate troops were in the area, they decided to press on to Cynthiana, another day's journey about 14 miles farther. Cynthiana, the county seat, was a bustling town, though considered by some as backwoods. There were thriving stores, a tobacco warehouse, and a sawmill. Hezzy found a market for his logs. When they finished at the sawmill, both men were ready for a hearty meal and a warm bed. They went to the Cynthiana Hotel and arranged to spend the night. That evening, Hezzy and Pappy happened to overhear a conversation led by Captain Dougherty of the 18th Regiment of Kentucky Infantry Volunteers. He was at the hotel recruiting men for his regiment. At first, the two paid little attention to the discussion at the captain's table. Hezzy was still grumbling about the poor price he'd gotten for his prime walnut logs. "Would have brought a better price if it hadn't been for this damn war," he muttered. But as they ate, they couldn't help but listen to the captain's words. He had a way of speaking that drew in the group of young men around him. He spoke of the need to defend the country's honor and keep the Union intact. He promised uniforms, rifles, and pay, $13 a month, and said they'd only be signing on for 1 year. Most of these boys had never owned a new suit of clothes, and $13 a month sounded like a fortune. "After you enlist," the captain said, "you'll get a 30-day furlough with pay to go home and settle your affairs." All these young bloods wanting to get in the fighting, huh? What do they know about fighting? Pappy scowled. "Betcha ain't none of 'em over 15. They don't know what they're fighting for. Of course, that $13 a month sounds mighty good to boys never seen that much money all at once." "Listen, Pappy," Hezzy said, "that money sounds good to me too. And I bet you wouldn't turn your nose up at it neither. Think how long it takes to earn that much doing what we've been doing these past few weeks. All them boys is doing is marching back and forth, maybe a little skirmish here and there. Why, this war'll be over in no time. Between you and me, I'm sorely tempted to join up myself, just to know I'd be making a regular wage every month." Hezzy surprised himself with that speech. It had never occurred to him to volunteer, though he strongly supported the Union. Still, a wife and 3 children seemed reason enough to stay home. Yet he kept thinking about the long winter ahead, with nothing to depend on but a few hogs and what game he could shoot or trap. He had to provide for his family. Maybe this was the answer. He felt sure Frances would support him, but the idea of long months away from her and the children weighed on him. Even so, the idea of steady pay kept coming back. He'd never had that before. By morning, Hezzy had made up his mind. He would find Captain Dougherty and enlist. First, though, he had to tell Pappy. At breakfast, Hezzy spoke. "Pappy, I've been thinking. This damn war can't last forever. So while the getting's good, I might as well join up and get some of that Union money too. It'll probably be over by tobacco setting time, and I reckon I'll be back home. You think you could look after Frances and the young'uns till then?" He hurried on. "I got 30 days to get everything done, so it wouldn't be too hard, and you'd have Willie to help." Pappy studied Hezzy a long moment before replying. He'd been thinking the same thoughts all night. $13 a month sounded good, especially if it only lasted a few months. He knew he could shoot better than most of the young blades he'd seen the night before. He had experience, and that ought to count for something. Even if they didn't want him for fighting, he could help with packing, cooking, or whatever else the army needed. "What makes you so damn sure I ain't gonna join up too?" he said. "I've been thinking about the same thing. Experience ought to be worth something. I may be close to 60, but I still got gumption and grit. And you know I ain't got no use for rebs." "What about Ma and Emily, Pa? Who'll look after them?" Willie ain't gonna want to stay home once he finds out what we done. Someone's got to be there with the women folk," Hizzy said. "Well, if he wants to join up, I can't stop him, but I doubt the army'd take him. He ain't none too bright. His ma can handle him, and he'd be some help to the women, I reckon," Pappy said. "Ma and Emily can go stay with Francis and the kids. They'd probably be more help there anyhow, and I'd still be bringing in pay." "I ain't gonna like it, Pa. You know she don't like you running off and leaving her." "Well, son, I don't reckon I have to tell her. If they need me, I'll just stay here, and you go back and break the news. That way I don't get no argument, and she don't get no choice," Pappy said with a grin. Hezzy knew Pa was right. If they were going to do this, it had to be done that way. Pappy didn't need to go back. Hezzy would go alone to settle things at home. He'd heard the captain say they had 30 days to do just that. The Union Army had learned the hard way that hill folk wouldn't leave their families unprovided. Furloughs were better than dealing with desertion. 99% of those men returned on or before the last day. "Well, Pa," Hezzy said, "let's go and get it done. I need to get back home with the money and supplies for Frances. She'll be worrying already, and I don't look forward to telling her." They found Captain Doherty with the other men who had signed up the night before. Hezzy took the oath of allegiance and enlisted in the Union Army on the 5th of December, 1861, in Company D of the 18th Regiment of Kentucky Volunteers, commanded by Colonel William Hammer. Pappy tried to enlist, but was told he was too old. He bragged he could outfight and outshoot any man there. Hezzy had his hands full, keeping Pappy from proving it then and there. Determined to stay with the Army, Pappy learned he could get work as a wagoneer. With his experience, had earned $18 a month. He signed on to drive wagons, haul supplies, cut trees, clear tent grounds, and guard prisoners. Despite being 59, Pappy was accepted. He served admirably, survived his enlistment, and lived to the ripe old age of 76. He is buried alongside the rest of the family in Doane Cemetery near Berry in Harrison County, Kentucky. Chapter 4, The Road Home. Captain Doherty granted Hezzy a 30-day furlough. Hezzy was now free to return home with the team, wagon, and the supplies he had bought from the sale of the logs. The family depended on these staples, flour, sugar, beans, coffee, salt, and the like, to get through the rest of the winter. Immediately after his swearing in, Hezzy was able to set off. It was mid-afternoon. The air was cold but clear. He knew the trip would take him a day and a half. As he started back that afternoon, he began to think about how his news would be received. The more he thought about it, the heavier his heart became. He didn't know how he was going to tell Frances of his decision, and he dreaded the hurt he knew he would see in her eyes. The December night was sharp with cold, the stars bright and distant against the black sky. Shivering, he pulled the wagon to a halt. "Whoa there, easy," he murmured to the horses. He fumbled for the blankets he carried, wrapping one over his shoulders and another across his lap, before nudging the team forward again. He knew the road well and felt he could gain a few extra hours by traveling in the dark for a bit with the help of a couple of kerosene lanterns. Eventually, he stopped for the night, built a fire, ate the food he had brought from town, and snuggled into his bedroll. The next day, the road unspooled before him, mile after lonely mile. It was still cold, but dry and clear. Hezzy's thoughts were already at home, in the warm kitchen, where Frances would be tending the fire. He could see his 4 children asleep in their beds. 8 years of marriage, and still he ached to see her face. How would he tell her? He vowed to make the most of the 30 days he'd been granted. He decided not to spoil his homecoming with the news of his enlistment. Frances was always so glad to see him when he returned. Better to wait until morning. As the wagon passed the little church at Antioch, memories rushed up from the deep places of his mind. Memories of her, of them, of the day it all began. Frances Eveline Williams had been just 16 the first time Hezzy saw her driving her father's rig to the mill. Hezzy had been a rough-hewn man of 26 then, a timber scout with big hands and a quick wit. Yet, from the moment he laid eyes on her, those twinkling brown eyes, those thick curls tumbling over her shoulders, he was lost. He remembered how lucky he had been to win her heart. Her father, Sanford Williams, owned a sawmill in Paris, Kentucky. Frances, born on April 2nd, 1836, was their youngest daughter. She grew up in a household where Levi, a stalwart, ebony black man, tended the stable and yard, and his wife Sari managed the kitchen and cared for Frances and her brother Porteus, affectionately called Pokey. Hezekiah Jeremiah Hardin was a tall, gangly man, ruggedly handsome with dark hair and keen eyes. He stood over 6 feet, a typical backwoods Kentuckian with little formal schooling, but a quick mind and an iron will. Slow to anger, but dangerous when roused by injustice, he could out-wrestle any man, break a colt, or dance till dawn and still work a full day. Hizzy could tote up a column of figures in his head faster than most could write them down. He could walk a woodlot and estimate how many feet of lumber it would yield. From Barberville to Cincinnati, he knew the land like the back of his hand. On his travels buying timber, he was a welcome visitor among cousins and friends, bringing news, humor, and a zest for life. Hizzy lingered in Paris longer than he had business to. He returned again and again to the Williams mill. He could not get Frances out of his mind. Hizzy knew Sanford Williams would not welcome a backwoods timberman into his family. Sanford was a mill owner, a man of deep South blood and stiff pride. Still, Hizzy couldn't stay away, and somehow, God help him, Frances had seemed to feel the same. Sanford loved his daughter deeply. Though he wasn't thrilled with the match, he realized she was of age and would do as she pleased. He feared opposing her might drive her away altogether. She was strong-willed, and once she made up her mind, there was no changing it. He recognized Hizzy's character, determination, work ethic, and devotion. Their courtship had been brief but intense. Hizzy knew Frances completed him. Her beauty, both inward and outward, had captured his soul. Frances admired Hizzy's kind heart and steady nature. She was drawn to his confidence and dependability. She saw in him someone loyal, steadfast, and true. When Hizzy proposed, Frances said yes without hesitation. The church in Cynthiana was chosen for its convenience. Hizzy's family was in Barry and Falmouth, Frances in Paris. Hizzy also had relatives in Cynthiana. His father had a dozen siblings, each with large families. Before the marriage, Hizzy posted a $50 marriage bond, a standard practice in Kentucky at the time. A marriage bond served as a legal guarantee that no lawful reason, such as a previous marriage or close kinship, existed to prevent the union. It wasn't a fee for the license itself, but a pledge of good faith, ensuring the marriage would take place. Though $50 was a considerable sum for a working man in those days, Hizzy considered it a small price for a lifetime with Frances. With Sanford's blessing, Hizzy and Frances were married on August 30th, 1853. Their wedding was plain but perfect. The Methodist church in Cynthiana, adorned with candles and late summer flowers, Frances in a white dress stitched by her mother's careful hands, Hizzy in his one good suit. There was no music, as was the custom, just vows, spoken in earnest, promises solemnly made before God and kin. The reception at Uncle Eli and Aunt Nancy's house was modest but warm. Guests shared hearty food and practical gifts, quilts, kitchenware, clothing. There was no alcohol and no dancing, in keeping with the customs of the time. The next evening, Hizzy's family hosted a shivaree, a noisy celebration meant to delay the couple's first night together. Friends banged pots and pans starting around 9 p.m., but the mood was jovial. Hizzy and Frances brought out food and drink and laughed with their guests. There was no hazing for Hizzy. His reputation for strength and stubbornness spared him the rougher games. 2 days later, Frances' family hosted an inn fair with music, dancing, and an abundance of food, formally welcoming Hizzy into their lives. After the inn fair, Hizzy and Frances set off for Falmouth. They stopped at the Antioch Inn and spent a few days together. Between lovemaking, they talked, laughed, and shared dreams for the future. Now, as Hazy guided his team back home through the cold, he thought of Frances, their life, and their 4 children. Their marriage had been wholesome and satisfying. They honestly enjoyed and thrived on one another's company. Frances had never complained about their simple home. She called it quaint and loved the rolling countryside that stretched beyond their door. It was the perfect place to raise a family. And now, as war darkened the horizon, Hazy clung to the memory of that happiness all the more. The horses plodded on, and Hazy whispered a prayer, "Lord, let her find it in her heart to forgive me."